Since we're getting toward the end of the program, I wanted to thank one more time our sponsors, CauseQuest, Kroll, and Ryan. Again, they're what makes possible just the wonderful speakers we've had over the last 2 days. I very much appreciate it. So in my talk this morning, I mentioned the endless march of broadband speeds, where we've gone from roughly a megabit per second back in the 90s to a gigabit per second in the 2020s, and probably 10 gigabits per second in the 2030 timeframe. I think the question is, what continuously drives this? And as we've gone from every generation, including from analog modems, there's always been the question of what in the world do we need more bandwidth for? What applications will this drive? And the answer has always been, well, we're not for sure, but we give some examples of what it might be, and try to forecast that. And what we found is that it continues up the path. And basically what this reflects is a fundamental forecasting principle that goes beyond just broadband speeds. It goes to just about any technological capability, is that performance improvement will continue as long as it's technically feasible to do so and that it's useful. So it costs money to advance the technology, to deploy it, and people are not going to do that unless they think it's useful. So you really need just two things. What we've also found is generally, if the technology approach stays the same, the rate will probably stay the same. If the technology changes, the rate of improvement might change. So when we went from analog modems to digital broadband, we did see a smaller change in the rate, but we also saw a step function. So when we have big technology changes, we may see a change in the rate. But the basic principle is, as long as it's feasible, as long as it's useful, it will continue. And since the increases in bandwidth up to 1K and 10K at least are certainly technically feasible, we know how to do it, the real question is whether it's useful or not. And that's kind of where I've been, my thinking is, the motivation for this is. So when I mentioned the 8K, this forecast was actually kind of important, because 8K will bring us to another level of broadband speeds, especially if you multiply that by perhaps in the future faster frame rates, which would require more bandwidth, not proportionally more, but somewhat more. So I think probably 8K, it would be sufficient to pull us up a curve quite a bit, and just like the 4K and HD has been as well. But now I'd like to kind of expand the picture to the big picture, I call it. I first gave show this slide here in this conference probably about 7 or 8 years ago. And I was just mentioning the first wave of transitions that drove the forecast early in my career, going back to the 90s, that we identified was going from physical movement to communications, telecom, from analog to digital communications, low bandwidth, high bandwidth, wireline to wireless. And pretty much all those things have occurred, and we've made those transitions. They continue to drive things, but they've seen their heyday, definitely, in terms of big changes. So again, in that presentation about 7 years ago, I mentioned what some of the new transitions were. And this was sort of the adoption of robots and drones and autonomous vehicles and things like that, doing more and more things that humans do, that the Internet of Things communicating, beginning to dominate over people communicating, and going from humans programming everything to more and more of a role for AI and cognitive computing. And then finally from going from screen-based solely to augmented and virtual reality. And we haven't really done a whole lot of talking about all these things, except for the Internet of Things since then, mostly because we focus in this conference and in the CTFG work on things that will make a big impact on telecom investment. And so things that drive bandwidth, for example, are things that we really concentrate on. Among these things, the things that will really drive bandwidth, though, are potentially the augmented and virtual reality. And so I think it's probably time to revisit those things and see where we are. And that's the motivation for this. So as Augie mentioned, the virtual reality tends to be where we actually replace the real world with a virtual world. And that requires some type of, it's usually a headset that covers our face and takes over. The augmented reality kind of combines the two, where we still can see the real world, and we just overlay stuff on the digital content on top of that. And then there's some other things that are called mixed reality, which I've never quite understood the difference between that and artificial reality, but it is entered the lexicon, as well as XR that covers all of that, plus things we don't talk about. And since my perspective is probably that we don't know exactly which of these are going to dominate and how they will be used, that maybe the safest thing is to just go with the term XR, called extended reality, and try to predict where that is. Now, normally what we'll do at this point is do drivers and constraints analysis, where we ask what's driving this technology in general and what's constraining it. And certainly in virtual reality, one of the constraints or the things that Augie mentioned is that you only want to spend so much time in these things, the virtual reality headsets. And further, you can't really see other people while you're doing that. So you have to rely on things like avatars to really represent each other. And for some people, in some situations, that's great. But I think for a lot of folks, particularly people like me, they're seeing the real person and interacting with the real person instead of an avatar is important. So there are definitely constraints there. And I think that's kind of driven home by, I think the same thing that Augie was alluding to, is we really haven't seen that much growth in AR headsets, excuse me, VR headsets. It's still growing, it's like 2 million shipments a year, which sounds like a lot, but when you're talking about a population of 330 million and population of gamers, for example, being 160 million, it's not really a big deal. And these are projections and statistics from the Consumer Technology Association, which are the same people that do CES. There are people that are really committed to consumer electronics, consumer technology. And their forecasts, if you look at this, show that the virtual reality segment of headsets grows very, very slowly. To even going out to 2025, 3 years in the future, we're still talking about only unit sales of maybe 5 or 6 million. They're seeing a lot more growth in the AR piece of it, which I kind of see, because AR doesn't require us to walk away from the real world. It doesn't require us to walk away from our environment. It doesn't require us to hide our face behind a bunch of technology. It offers a lot more opportunity for blending the real world to the virtual world. Survey of business leaders that the CTA did, they identify gaming as the primary use of XR type technologies. About half of them did. Movies, television, marketing, advertising, events. About a third of them said that was the area. A lot of them also mentioned enterprise sectors like healthcare and medical manufacturing, et cetera. And of these, 85 said they were engaged in some type of XR project, up from 77% in 2019. Now, be aware that these business leaders are people that are heavily involved in consumer electronics, not your typical business person in the field. I wanted to, before I just mention AR and VR and XR in particular, just talk about gaming and social media. over 50% of the population plays video games. It's not growing real fast, but it's a big number. And of that number, about half of them play on PCs or laptops or some type of larger than mobile screen device. But beyond that, there's what's called GVC, gaming video content. And this is where you basically watch or talk about or share with other people gaming experiences. 71% of millennial gamers watched did GVC last year. Something that I don't get, but my youngest is heavily involved in doing this both professionally and in her spare time. She spends like 4 hours on Twitch doing exactly this with the followers that pay her money to do it. So this is kind of goes, I think I want to stress here about this is combining social and social media with gaming. And it's accounting for a lot of people's time. If you look at the video that Facebook did for the metaverse, is very heavily oriented to gaming and social around gaming. Basically, the little avatar of what's this guy's name? I'm totally spaced on. Huh?
Mark Zuckerberg.
Zuck. He changes to in the little promo video. He changes into his avatar very quickly, and the first thing he does is dive into this virtual world and starts playing a game with a bunch of other video game with a bunch of avatars. So he very much is stressing the social aspect of and the gaming aspect of AR. And this is very much obviously focused on the immersion type of VR. And then if you look at what Microsoft said when it bought Activision for $69 billion, said gaming is the most dynamic, exciting category in entertainment and will play a key role in the development of metaverse platforms. I think this purchase made Microsoft the third biggest gaming provider worldwide. So we have a lot going on in this kind of intersection of gaming and social media, and a lot of thought that maybe this, along with metaverse, is where a lot of VR and AR is going to go. But what I wanted to really drive home here is that headsets aren't the only XR game in town, either for gaming or for other types of immersion. For one thing, we have holographic displays coming on now. There was a little clip on the news from CES this year about the using a hologram to beam the reporter here in the black dress from LA to Las Vegas, and being interviewed by the CEO of a company called Portal that provides this technology. You didn't happen to see that, did you, Augie, when you were there? You're on mute, Augie.
No, I did not see that one. It was
okay.
It was a big show floor.
Yeah, I understood. They also have a little version of this that you can sit on your dresser that's showing down in the bottom. But basically, it's using hologram and fancy cameras to put a 3D image that appears to be there. So this is not like a little traditional 3D put on your red and green glasses type of 3D. This is a hologram TV that you look around and it really does appear to be there. I like this is a quote from the Portal. I'll just read it. It says, David's vision for Portal is to facilitate communication of all kinds that adds the emotional element that previous virtual methods lack. He wants to see a portal in every home, streaming world-class. Now I can't see it because something's covering it, but you can read it. across every divide. I like that feeling much more than the feeling of putting on a VR headset. There was another not holographic display company called Looking Glass. They have again a desktop and a dresser top version of their holograph. If you look at their ads, they said that no dystopian futures allowed. So you see this graphic of all these people in an audience wearing headsets, and I thought that's no way to conference. But then I love what they say. We believe that the interfaces of the future won't be worn in your head 16 hours a day. They will be more like campfires, glowing with three-dimensional fields of light that you can gather around with others. Again, much more according to what I like to see. Another whole category is immersion rooms, and with these immersion rooms, what you have is there's various ways to set it up. These are several examples, but one is to basically have several projectors, each projecting on a wall. So you have an HDTV or an HD shot of each with video, and then you actually go into this room, and then you kind of experience much more of a 3D immersion than you would with a single screen. And in fact, technology futures through, well, actually our nonprofit R84 and TFI projects is doing an immersion room as one of our art projects called Geraldine Space. Basically, Geraldine was an artist here in Austin who basically painted the inside of her mobile home with art. And although the trailer home was destroyed, we have high resolution digital photos of all this art. And what we're doing with Geraldines Place is we're going to take these photos and project them on walls so that you can see a three-dimensional version of the house and just walk into it and go into the various rooms by varying what we project on the screens. We actually built a prototype of this in one of my bedrooms at my house, and this is basically showing the prototype of Geraldine's Place, an immersion room, and we're working on expanding this and improving it, building interaction, putting in little videos to go with the still to make it more immersive and more interactive. So stay tuned for more on that. Now, I don't think everybody's going to devote a room in their house to an immersion room, but there is a subset of the market that probably will. We do have people that have home theaters. There are about 22% of households with a potential more. Not all of them, not even a majority of them are using projectors, but some are. There may well be a sub-market that will indeed have immersion room type home theaters in the future and connected to all different types of media, including gaming. And some of my visions for the immersion room, even the one that TFI projects and R84 are working on, would go well beyond art, but also to immersive dancing, conferences, personal Zoom meetings with family, et cetera, that would involve multiple cameras and multiple screens, but still not hide you behind a face mask, so to speak, or goggles. So there are a lot of possibilities for this XR to go. I was trying to get across that a lot of them aren't involved with the clunky headsets that do have a lot of constraints. Have no idea, which ones will actually when, but I just can't help but think with all the thought, with all the money from all different directions going into this, that through some medium, some application, some medium, that it will take off. So in summary, we know that the 1G and 10G is achievable using current technology approaches. We know that advances in XR and XR advanced adoption will continue, although the form is uncertain. We do also know that whatever form it takes, it's going to require more bandwidth, whether it's multiple screens or going to 8K or beyond, higher, faster frame rates, whether it involves holograph, all those things will require more bandwidth, particularly as quality goes up, but not incredibly more, certainly in the range of the 1 to 10G. So my conclusion is that based on that, the historical trends in broadband rates will likely continue into the 2030s.
Well, let me give you a quick reaction to that, Larry. I think the most important point in all of that is there's this world of opportunity being presented by the available bandwidth, and the whole universe of XR technologies presents a way to use this bandwidth to leverage or, again, monetize it. The one thing I'd layer on top of what you said, when you're looking at this new world of video games, it's also a world for advertisers. The same way that you have the games are a place for not only socializing, competing, they're also a place where advertisers can post messages and reach people the same way you formerly would through TV or print. So looking at that as another revenue opportunity, another way to exploit the technology. Again, a lot going on there.
And indeed, thank you.